How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Mike here. Today's video, I want to continue the story of my success and my failures in my early 20s or my mid 20s. If you followed this channel from the beginning, you've probably seen my video how I went from zero to millionaire by the age of 25, and then the second round of that video is how I lost just about everything that I've earned or that I earned back when I was 25 in a business startup. This is what happened after that. But more importantly, what I want to showcase in this video is how I got my wake-up call to basically start all over again. I guess the journey from then to now here. But obviously a lot of things happened. Story goes, I made a lot of money, and then I lost a lot of money. And if you've ever been in this position, I don't wish it on my worst enemy. But then again, in some ways, it can be advantageous because there's a lot you learn when you're down. First, you learn about relationships in terms of people who are really there for you, and you learn your own character. A lot of character is built whenever you're down because you learn to get back up, and there's a lot of education that happens. At least that was the case for me. Fast forward 2 years later, after I had done very well, again in my mid-20s, and I was pretty much going downhill from there, and I lost, my business. Not only did I lose that business that I tried to build, I also got myself into debt. Again, a lot of it is business debt. So I was at this crossroad where emotionally, mentally, I was done. Whenever you find yourself in this situation, you sort of go into a depression. And for me, I didn't know what was next. I had spent the last 2 years of my life trying to build this thing that I thought would become this amazing business that people would love, blah, 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 but that didn't happen. So as time went on, I tried to live life as best as I could. But one of the first big steps that I took, and with my then fiance, was to move across the country. Because one of the things I realized is that when you're down and you're lowest, you need your family. Where we were at in California, we were basically 2,000 miles away from the closest family member or friend. So we both decided that at this point in our lives, it would be a really good idea to move closer to family. And so that was the first step. Now, once I moved back to the East Coast, I still was down. It's not just a switch like this. And again, I didn't know what to do. I remember my fiance, now my wife, she was really there in terms of helping, sort of lifting us up in terms of working and helping with the bills, because again, at this point I had little to no income. And even with the asset that I had sold, as a matter of fact, that was my only contribution to our finances. I was helping with some of the bills, with some of the stuff that I had sold. And ultimately that ran out, but still I couldn't really work or think of what to do. But she was able to work, and I remember at one point she had to hold on to 3 jobs just to help keep things moving. But also she was there to help me emotionally process all the stuff that I needed to process and get back on my feet. And ultimately I decided that the best way, while I still figure things out, was to drive for Lyft. So your boy drove for Lyft. A lot of people may not know this story, but I drove for Lyft for a while there, almost a year. And I remember I wasn't sad or anything. I needed something to do, obviously, so I don't just collapse somewhere. Even driving for Lyft, as humbling as that was, it was a good thing for me because it gave me something to do and something to look forward to. And I remember how the whole thing worked. Given now, I didn't even have a car, by the way. I was using my wife's car. So after we moved, we only had one car because I had sold. My car was one of the assets or liabilities that I sold. And so with only one car, when my wife would go to work, she would get back in the late afternoon, and then I would take her car and just go out and drive for Lyft and try to see how much I could make. That went on for a few weeks, and I remember when I first got started, man, it was hard. I remember those first 2 weeks, I may have made 10 to 20 bucks a day. And it was frustrating as hell because here's one thing, guys. My whole adult life, when I think of my career ever since I started working or earning money, again, I got my first job way back in middle school or high school. But after I got into this entrepreneurship world, I never really worked for hourly wages. You know, my income will come from either a big sale or something else that I was doing. The concept of working per hour just doesn't exist in my world. So I had to sort of learn that driving for Lyft, and I would calculate, okay, I came out to drive from this time to this time. I would be so crushed when I would get home and I didn't even have 15 or 20 bucks to my name. And I was like, so I just went out, drove, wasted gas for 3-4 hours, and I only made 10 bucks.
You know, totally worth it.
But like anything, once you start learning the ropes, I then started to figure out, okay, what is the best time to actually drive? It wasn't 3 or 4 p.m. when my wife gets back. I figured out, one, the best places or best time to drive, and also the best locations to get the most pings. For those of you who are new to driving for Lyft or Uber, these are probably some lessons you can take. If you're starting out, you don't have to just waste your gas. Just stay in one location that you know you always get pings. So I learned all those things over time. But before I did, I remember just how, again, terrible I would feel whenever I would go out, you know, drive for however many hours and come home with peanuts. But when I think about those times now, one blessing you get with driving for Lyft is that you're alone. For the most part, again, I'm in the car alone, just driving. You're left with your thoughts. And for me, I got a lot of time to think. For a while there, my whole thought process was just feeling sorry for myself, which is never helpful. Victimizing myself and thinking about all the things that I'd accomplished and then lost. And, you know, you do that to yourself when you're in a down spout, so to speak. I would think a lot. And in some cases, I would even cry. My wife doesn't even know this, that I used to cry in the car because it was just devastating. And again, I would think, but it got better. My thoughts got better. Driving for Lyft, like I said, was such a humbling experience. But not only did it teach me, one, to be grateful for what I had, and I remember when I was doing very well, I felt like I took a lot of things for granted. I didn't know, one, how to manage whatever I had earned, and I didn't know much about money. So also this time was a great process for me, one, to start educating myself about my own finances. I learned how to pay my debt back. So if you recall, I got myself in some debt and I didn't know how to pay for it. So I learned about consolidating my debt. I learned about the fact that you can negotiate your debt. I did not know this. I just thought you always borrow and you pay whatever it is you owe with 1,000% interest for a lifetime. I did not know that you can actually pick up the phone and call your creditor and negotiate your debt. And in my case, I was at the place where I just could not afford to pay $100,000 or however much I owed. You know, I didn't have those funds, nor did I have the income to even make monthly payments that would satisfy what they were asking for. I learned how these things work. I learned how it affected my credit score and all that stuff. All these times I would get in the car, go drive for Lyft, I would come home and figure out how to pay off my debt. It's a crazy cycle when you think about it, where you're going to work, in my opinion, then it felt like peanuts, right? The money that you're making, I'm trying to figure out how to use this to pay my debt off. Guys, it's not a cozy, nice feeling when you're in debt. That was how that whole thing worked. But here's when my wake-up call came in. I remember a particular Friday. This was a Friday night. And crazy enough, this is embarrassing to say, guys, there was a point in time there where we were so strapped with cash. I had an X amount, and this was the rules that I created. I had an X amount of a contribution. So my wife said, okay, this is your contribution, this is my contribution. There were moments where some utility bills would be due in a day or two, and I couldn't meet my own obligation. For me to do that, I had to go drive the night before and make sure that I made 80 bucks or however much to cover that bill that was coming. And I remember this particular Friday night, I got out, and again, I had gotten to the point now driving for Lyft that I had learned to accept it, and I had learned to actually appreciate it and look forward to it, because guys, ultimately, no matter what it is that you're doing, whether you're balling out in life or you're doing something that's humbling, you have to understand what you're getting back. You know, as crazy as it was for me to, or then I thought it was crazy to be driving for Lyft, it gave me a purpose. It gave me means to be able to support myself and my family or my partner to a certain extent. It gave me something to do and purpose. So I learned to accept that and to look forward to it. This particular Friday night, I actually looked forward to driving, and I didn't think anything bad. I wasn't in a bad mood. I was driving around for a long period. This was on a winter night. And if you know anything about the state of Georgia, it rains. Even sometimes it snowed once or twice since I've been here, and it was a mess that night. But anyway, this night I got out and I got a ping to go pick somebody up. So the way Lyft works, they ping you and then you accept and you go pick them up. This person was about 25 miles. I don't even know why I accepted this, but I was driving around. This was the only ping I was able to get. I decided to accept that ping, and I drove. It felt like a never-ending drive. I drove for, I don't know, about 45 minutes to an hour to go pick this person. And in my mind, I'm thinking, yo, when I pick up this person, they're probably gonna go to maybe the airport. When I do airport trips, always great, because generally speaking, it's a long distance drive, and then also when you're at the airport, chances are you're gonna get a passenger to take to another long distance drive. So in my mind, I thought, okay, even this is the only hit I get tonight, I'm cool with it. So I go to pick this person up, and they were in the middle of nowhere. First of all, I had never been to this part of town before. It was like south of Georgia. I get to the place, it's dark as hell, just in the middle of nowhere. And I pick this person up, and here's also another thing with Lyft is when you pick someone up, they don't tell you, you know, where that person is going initially. That's another way for Lyft not to discourage a driver, because imagine if Lyft told you the distance that your passenger is going, then you can pick and choose if it's worth going to pick them up. But anyway, I drove the distance, and when they got in my car and I finally got, okay, the location we're going, guys, they were only traveling to the gas station. Bruh. I drove an hour to pick this person up, only to take them 5 minutes away from their home to get a pack of cigarettes. And I remember just thinking to myself, anyway, let me finish the story. So we go to the gas station, they get in, they get out. Now, another thing I didn't know back then is you can always charge someone whenever they have multiple stops. Technically, every Lyft drive should be from location A to location B, and that's it. If you have to take them from location B to back to location A, that should be another charge. I didn't know much then. So I take them to the gas station, they buy their pack of cigarette, and I take them back home. I remember this was now like 1:30 a.m. I remember dropping the person off and seeing how much I got paid for that ride. $3.26. $3.26. I would never forget that number, because again, it was my wake-up call. And I remember just putting in my GPS to go home.
It's time to go home.
Normally, when I would drive to any location, I would try to stick around to see if there's anybody else who would ping, or perhaps if I get lucky, maybe I can get a ping that takes me back the way home. But I wasn't even patient for that on this night, because I was so devastated that I drove an hour to pick this person up, only to take them to the gas station. And on the way home, I shed a tear. I remember just crying on my way home. And in those moments, I prayed. I did the only thing I know how to do in a situation where I didn't know what the hell was happening with my life. And I'm just like, I shouldn't be here. You know, I should be doing something more valuable with my time. And I started saying those things to myself. That was my wake-up call. That moment, driving home that night, was my wake-up call. And it was that night that I decided that I was gonna pick back up what I used to do, which is as a web developer, digital marketing. And I remember that same morning, late morning, I started applying for jobs. So I started applying for jobs around the city of Atlanta, and I started to look back at some of my old projects, things that I had worked on in the past. Now, if you ever met me, I usually work on like a million different things at a time. It's like experimenting, and generally speaking, I'll end up with one or two things that's maybe doing well. I look back at my archive to see, okay, what was I doing all these years, to see if there's something I could pick back up. I didn't do it because of, oh, it's gonna make me X amount of dollars. I did it just because I wanted a different purpose. I wanted something new that gave me a reason to get up in the morning. That was the start for me, and that was when I started to pick myself back up. It took me taking that drive and making $3.26. And I say all of that to say this, is that if you found yourself in this position, trust me, I know how hard it is, especially if you feel like you don't have any support. But again, you also owe it to yourself to make the effort to get out there and be around people. And in my case, it wasn't so much being around people. I had a great amount of support, went from my wife, but it took me taking the effort to drive for Lyft to get my wake-up call. And sometimes that could be the case. Perhaps you just needed to take an action that would devastate you somehow and make you realize just how valuable your time is. And I kid you not, from that day forward, I picked up my old habits in terms of going back to what I love to do, and started just educating myself. Whenever you are in my industry or in the tech industry in general, things change like overnight. So I started to learn, okay, what new things is being used today, what new marketing tools is happening, what people are using. And I started to educate myself. And guys, I still drove for Lyft, believe it or not. I still drove for Lyft, but now whenever I would drive, I learned the game of Lyft in terms of knowing the perfect times to go and the perfect days to go. And I calculated it and I executed it so perfectly to only meet my requirement or my obligation in terms of how much I wanted to contribute to the house bills, right? I did that for a few more months, but the only difference this time is, instead of driving for Lyft and then coming home and doing nothing, or trying to figure out my debt repayment, I came home and I just buried myself in what I was truly passionate about. For a year or so, nothing happened with it, but just doing it gave me a sense of purpose. And that was how I was able to pick myself up. And before you know it, it got to a point where I said, okay, this thing is doing well. And believe it or not, YouTube was one of those things that I picked up. I had my YouTube channel since I lived in California, but I left it alone because, again, I wasn't doing anything. And it's interesting. I remember what got me wanting to do YouTube more was I went back and I read a bunch of comments that I didn't even know existed, because again, I had abandoned it for months. And I read comments of people who watch my crappy videos and would say things like, hey, thanks so much for sharing your journey. This is inspiring. I've always wanted to do this. And just reading those type of comments. And I remember one particular comment, I keep this person, I really hope I get to meet them in person. They were always commenting on my videos. And I remember that night I read the comment, listen, your channel is gonna blow up one day. You just keep doing what you're doing. Just gave me some type of encouragement that from a perfect stranger. And I remember my channel at that time was at 759. 759. I'm talking about my aviation channel, Mojo Grip. 759 was the amount of subscribers I had when I read that comment. Mojo Grip now has over 200,000 subscribers. But I remember reading that comment and saying to myself, like, hey, if a perfect stranger can believe in what you're doing, then you owe it to yourself to at least try to do more of it. So YouTube was one of the things I picked up, and I did YouTube because I was truly passionate about aviation. But also what came before aviation for me was my digital marketing, web development. I just love, creating new ideas and building a website around it. And I picked those things up. And before you knew it, it went like this. Lyft was right here and my projects were right here. And over time, it just came up to the moment I was like, okay, I don't need Lyft anymore. And that's how I got back up. And now a lot of people can look at my life and see like, hey, this guy's doing great. This guy comes from a wealthy family. Again, I've been accused of that. You can look and have your perspective on what I've been doing or how I got to this point. But this is my real journey. I didn't always, live well or okay. Again, when I talk about finances or wealth building, I'm truly passionate about it because I've been here, and I've been here. You know what I mean? So my life has kind of been this graph. When I was first here, high up, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know much about money. I didn't know much about credit, none of that. I always told myself then when I was getting education that if I get the opportunity to climb up that ladder again, I'm going to sustain it for a lifetime. And I'm going to learn every tool I possibly need to learn to keep going. And that's what I'm putting out there for you today. And so I guess you can get a sense of where the passion and the drive comes from. This is it. I've been at the bottom of the bottom. My wake-up call came in when I was driving for Lyft, and I decided to pick things back up. I say all of that hopefully to inspire somebody who may think that they're done with, especially if you're young. Like if you're at a young age, even if you're in your middle ages, there's still so much life you gotta live. You just have to take action towards something, anything. Listen, you don't have to be passionate about it. This is one misconception I hear all the time where people say, do something you're passionate about and then you would never work again. It's bullshit. Just do something. I think it's the reverse. I think action comes before the passion. You can learn actually to fall in love with something. You can learn to be passionate about something. But the most important part is that you do something. If it's out of necessity, and in many cases when you're down, it should be out of necessity. Just do something, anything, and then learn to appreciate that thing for giving you purpose. That was the case with me. And I really hope that my story helps somebody to get started or get back up. That's my spiel, another personal story in Mike Ojo's life. I hope you enjoy this. And like I said, I really hope somebody gets helped by watching this video. If you did, please give a thumbs up. And if this is your first time, be sure to subscribe. I really appreciate the support, guys. And I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.